Kabelo Maaka is an award-winning animator and illustrator. She founded her own company, Cabblow Studios, alongside her mother, a medical doctor. She's passionate about using her animation as a tool to educate and illuminate contemporary life in South Africa. She's one of the pioneering African women in animation and was one of the continental finalists at the 2019 Nairobi edition of Animation du Marche Peach competition with her project, which was called The Farm.
Her film, 3 Teaspoons of Sugar, has been screened at Annecy International Animation Festival and has made the official selection for the Accra Animation Film Festival back in 2020. She joins us live this morning to discuss about her work and how she combines medicine and animation. Of course, that's talking about her mother, Dr. T. Maaka, and also we have joining us Kabelo Maaka herself. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
You have this bright smile that's already illuminating our studios, and we can feel the energy from there. But let's go back to the beginning of your story and your journey. Give us the backstory of how this journey started for you and what drives your art.
I mean, I think I've been drawing my whole life, and my mother's been a doctor my whole life. And thankfully, she took me seriously when I said I wanted to work in animation. And so we went on this long journey learning about how animation actually works. We went to the States for a little bit. I studied in South Africa and in France. And then when I couldn't find work, I started Cabblow Studios after my 4th year of university. And my mom said, hey, why don't we do medical animation? And at first I was very resistant, but I realized it was very clever as a way to differentiate ourselves. And so that's how we ended up doing Cabblow Studios. And Cabblow is a play on my name, Kabelo.
Well, it's a very, very interesting story. But I want to also talk about the interest in animation. You know, was that something you've always found interesting? Were there things that maybe triggered that interest? And you know, then also talk about what connection this had with the medical field. What are you trying to sell? What are you trying to give your audience?
Yeah, I'm not even sure what it is about animation that drew my eye, but now that I'm a little bit older and trying to understand myself, I think it's that process of creating. It makes me feel like my creator, because I'm Christian as well. So that process of creating, I guess, is what appeals to me with animation. And Dr. T, you can talk about the medical side.
Well, I realized that she had a gift to draw while she was maybe about 3 years of age, and she used to draw in all of my medical books. And because I wanted to be a doctor at the age of 8 and became one at the age of 22, I thought I should nurture that talent. And I could see that sometimes she would draw things on pages, and when you open the pages, the picture would look like it was moving. And I think that's where the interest in animation came from. In terms of my interest in animation, I just wanted to be a mom, that supports her daughter, take her to school, be a Christiana, like I always say, a momager, and that was it. Until I realized and had a lot of patients asking me what an anesthetist does, which is what I've been trained to do in medicine. And so I said to her, why don't we create animations to explain what an anesthetist does, so that people can understand, when we just show up and they know what we are there to do. And that's how we then got to create medical animations. It was never my intention to join her in animation. I was just there to help. But then I also saw the need to help in developing the business, because I've run my medical practice, I've run a medical tourism business before. So I thought I could come in handy, not just be a mom in this business. But what we're trying to do really is to educate on difficult concepts. Medicine can be quite difficult
and overwhelming.
So animation actually makes it charming, makes it it simplifies it, and therefore people can then understand what we doctors do, the processes, procedures, and so on. So what we wanted to do was to actually educate simply using animation, and it cuts across all literacy levels, from the young and the very old, the uneducated and the educated. So it cuts across all the literacy levels.
Dr. Shepo, I think you're doing amazing as a mother, being able to nurture the talent that your daughter has. A lot of us grew up in times where you either had to be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer or an accountant. It's so beautiful to see that people are allowing their kids nurture their talents and their giftings and just following their callings. So thank you for doing that. And
thank you.
Let's have a look at the trailer. And when we come back from that, I'm going to share a secret with you. But let's have a look at the trailer.
You say.
And now the secret I said I was going to share. I'd always nursed the desire to be a medical doctor. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening anymore. But you are the doctor here, Dr. T. Talk to us about, how we can tell more stories. I mean, you're joining your daughter, and we're seeing a fusion of animation and medicine. And this is something that can cut across all other sectors, not just limited to medicine. How would you say this has, empowered the ability to tell stories, especially in the medical sector? And how can we, spread this to different cultures and different cultures and different professions? Yes.
Let me tell you something. I think what I love about animation is that you can use any language, just create the pictures, use any language, any subtitle, and people can then understand what you're trying to say. Look, I have heard, there's another film that we did called 3 Teaspoons of Sugar, which speaks about type 2 diabetes in 3 members of my family who, unfortunately, all of them have passed away. And over the years, I had been managing them. I've been managing them, and they never used to hear me until I feel what we did this film and we let them watch. And once they had seen what diabetes was doing to their bodies, they then understood what I had been trying to tell them over the years, So what we try to do with animation is not just give figures, just tell you the statistics, which can be boring sometimes. We're using stories, personal stories, and real life stories to tell and educate on complex medical and surgical things. So I actually think, in fact, yesterday I was reading about art and health, and I think animation as a form of art enhances how we communicate, enhances how we demonstrate medicine, enhances how we change behavior, because after they have started watching the films, in fact, a lot of people that came to the premiere of one of our films said that it helped us change our behavior. So I'm thinking that if we create more stories, more personal stories, depict what other people can never, because you even though you wanted to be a doctor, you can never know what we do in operating theaters. But animation can allow us to take you on a journey of what happens in theater, what happens on the operating table, and change your mind if your mind was stuck on old behaviors that don't change or modify your health. So I actually think this is something that, and I'm glad that I paid for all those school fees for you to go to animation school. I'm now realizing the use of it. I didn't know then, but once we did it, I realized and I've tested it. I've tested it with audiences, using text and using animation. And I've seen
animation is more memorable.
It's more memorable. People retain more information, and then it also helps them to change their behavior. So I'm excited. Thank you, Kabelo.
Must also be very interesting, switching between calling her mom and calling her Dr. T. But I want to speak to Kabelo now. Kabelo, there's other people, young girls, in across the continent, who might also have, different passions. But they people would argue that you have to be on a certain level of privilege, before you can pursue certain passions. So what would your advice be, to a young girl like you in Nairobi or in Lagos, Nigeria, or in Egypt, in Zambia, who has interest in animation or any other, passion that she might have? What would you say to her, seeing, of course, the level that you've gotten to?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great question. You have to choose yourself. And also at the same time, you've got to be able to convince your parents that this thing is possible. And you convince them with a number of different things. For example, watch this episode and use us as evidence that this thing is very much possible. But you've got to choose yourself. Like for me, I really struggled to believe in myself. It's just been me and my mom my whole life. And when I couldn't find work, it was like, okay, are you going to be a statistic, or are you going to try and just do something with what little you do have? And so I think it is about choosing yourself, hiring yourself, and then finding things to convince your parents that this is actually viable, and being okay when they don't understand. Because while I've had a very supportive mom, my family didn't always understand this animation thing. Your mother is a doctor. How can you do cartoons? I should be following in her footsteps. And as we've been making slow progress with every little win, every little piece of progress that we make, then they start to understand what animation actually is and are even willing to participate in my films like my grandmother did before she passed away. So I really think it's just about choosing yourself and then finding things to prove to your parents that actually this is possible. And they might resist at first, but you just keep pursuing it and they will come around eventually.
I mean, and might I add on to proving that so that they may support. I said to her, if this thing doesn't make money, I'm taking you to medical school for sure. And the first thing that we did made money. And I said, if your first project doesn't make this amount of money, I'm taking you to medical school.
Yeah, and the pressure was real.
And when it made it, I said, then you can go with it. You have my full support.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. You are indeed the fantastic pair. We wish you all the best from here on. We look forward to seeing you doing exploits around the world. I'm very curious, we've run out of time in maybe 10 seconds. How long does it take you to put together an animation piece?
A professional animator can make 5 seconds of animation in one day. So that's how it goes.
Whoa. So I think this now puts perspective to how much work goes on behind the scenes.
Wow.
We appreciate your work and your talent. Thank you so much, Kabelo Maaka. And thank you, Dr. T. Maaka, for joining us this morning. We wish you all the best.
Thank you for having us.